Which FDA guidance documents apply to me? Where do I find FDA guidance documents? How do I prove I'm following an FDA guidance document? And should I follow outdated guidance documents? Why would I want to? All this and more on this episode of MedTech Crossroads. FDA standards and guidance documents are not the same thing. In fact, FDA doesn't release standards like we covered on a recent episode of MedTech Crossroads. It only recognizes standards from industry. But sometimes FDA has specific expectations about how they want to see things in your submission, and this is where FDA guidance comes in as opposed to standards. Now, FDA guidance documents are voluntary, but voluntary, as you might expect, is a relative word. So you'll want to stay aware of what's out there. FDA says that guidance represents FDA's current thinking on a topic. They do not create or confer any rights for or on any person and do not operate to bind FDA or the public. You can use an alternative approach if the approach satisfies the requirements of the applicable standards and regulations. But as you might imagine, FDA is generally going to expect you to follow their guidance unless you have a really good reason not to do so. There's often a public comment period when guidance documents are being issued in draft form. So, like standards, they're not developed in a complete vacuum. But if you missed the public comment period, or perhaps it was released without one, it's always possible to comment on FDA guidance documents on the FDA website. So which FDA guidance documents apply to me and where can I find them? Well, you can find them right at this link. And you can browse FDA guidance topics by topic, or you can search for them by brute force. Now on this page we're showing, as you can see from the titles, FDA guidance documents are actually titled, in my humble opinion, pretty well. They're very specific. The titles are long, but they're very descriptive. This will help you to understand if this guidance applies to you. So for example, assessing the credibility of computational modeling and simulation in medical device submissions may be a mouthful, but it sure does tell me that if I'm going to submit finite element models or other types of computational modeling to the FDA in a submission, this guidance document is for me. Or, for example, enforcement policy for clinical electronic thermometers. Well, that one's not for everybody, but if your product is a clinical electronic thermometer, you're going to want to read this guidance document. It's free and it's a click away. As always, it can be a really good idea to work with somebody knowledgeable in the space of FDA guidance documents, either to help you find them or to know how to comply with them. Most of us in the industry are more than happy to answer quick, specific questions. So if you have quick, specific questions about your guidance needs, feel free to reach out to Into Being or another reputable design and regulatory firm with those questions. So how do I prove I'm following a guidance document? Much like a recent episode on MedTech Crossroads on standards, the answer is usually objective evidence. Objective evidence is things that FDA is going to be able to look at to evaluate your compliance. Let's do a specific example just for fun. I mentioned a guidance on computational modeling in medical device submissions. The guidance is focused very specifically on the idea of credibility. Sure, you made a pretty picture with your finite element model, but is it true? What is truth? Well, that's a deeper question. But in the case of finite element models, truth means that the model agrees, at least pretty well, with reality for a specific domain and context of use. And here's the problem. If the physical test were easy to run, you wouldn't need the finite element model or the computer simulation. Its value is only because the test is probably hard to do. I think a lot of people believe that computational modeling is inherently true, but there are so many variables at play in complex models that if they are true, they're only true in specific domains. The model has to be validated for its domain of use. So what's a developer to do? In the guidance, the FDA focused the developer on the question of interest. What question are you trying to answer with your model? The context of use, and the risk inherent in trusting the model. With those limitations on the domain of the model, FDA further asks the developer to provide credibility evidence including things like bench test validation results, code verification results, and in vivo validation results. So now we start to see the basic concern that FDA has, which is, has the computational model been validated on the domain of interest? Are the risks of the consequences of the model being wrong understood? And what evidence do we have that the model is true and represents reality over that particular domain? You're going to want to give FDA analysis and reporting in each of these categories that they've mentioned. If you need help coming up with ways to address particular deliverables or understanding how you might meet them, feel free to reach out to Into Being. Should I follow outdated FDA guidance documents? Like standards, it's possible to get latched on to an older version of a document that's obsolete. So it's always a good practice to check the guidance document database from time to time. At the same time, sometimes the most recent guidance document is actually really old. We've found that whether they're new or they're old, it's best to understand as much as you can about an approach to a particular area from anything that looks current. Then ask FDA specific questions about applicability and currency in a pre-sub with the agency. These dialogues can get you some really actionable answers, as long as you ask really specific questions. So what's FDA working on today in the world of guidance? Well, at this website, you can find their A list, their B list, as well as historic guidance documents that they've issued. As a for example, for 2024, FDA is planning on releasing final guidances on medical device remanufacturing, medical device shortages, and predetermined change control plans for AI/ML devices. FDA is also working on a slew of draft guidances on everything ranging from AI and cybersecurity to pulse oximeters to evaluation of sex-specific and gender-specific data in medical device clinical studies, and more. Be sure to check out the guidance documents website at fda.gov. In conclusion, guidance documents are an important part of the medical device development process. You can and should get into the guidance documents database yourself, in addition to whatever partners you bring on. And don't forget to discuss any specific questions you may have with the FDA in your pre-sub to get the help that you need. We hope this episode of MedTech Crossroads saves you time on your medical device development journey. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this.